Have you ever looked at your paycheck, your savings account, maybe even your 401k, and still felt like somehow you are behind? On paper, things look good. I mean, you went to school, you built a career, you're responsible with money, but there's still this quiet pressure, this quiet little voice in the back of your mind saying, like, why am I still feeling like I'm behind? And that's because you're not thinking about surviving anymore. You're thinking about building wealth. You're thinking about helping your parents someday. Maybe you're thinking about not working until you're 70. You're thinking about creating options for your future and your family. And so suddenly you realize something that nobody has warned you about. Being successful with money is a completely different skill than earning money. A lot of high achieving Latinas are doing everything right and still feel confused about the next step. Not because we're incapable, but because many of us are the first in our families trying to build wealth. We don't have a blueprint. We don't have una tia explaining investments at family parties. So if you're feeling a mix of ambition, anxiety, and responsibility around money, this episode is for you. Today, I'm breaking down 10 things that every Latina wealth builder should know if she wants financial success. And this isn't going to be hustle culture or any shame based financial tips. First, I want you to understand you are not bad with money. One of the biggest lies that many Latinas carry is this quiet belief that I'm just bad with money. But when you actually zoom out, it's a different story. Being bad with money just means that nobody has taught you the rules of wealth. You were never taught how wealth actually works. Most of us learned survival money skills, which meant work hard, save what you can, and of course, avoid debt. And yes, those lessons helped our family survive, but they were never designed to build long term wealth. So then, when you start thinking about investing, assets, or financial freedom, it could feel foreign and confusing. And confusion doesn't mean that you are a failure, it just means that you just haven't learned the game yet. The next thing is that money is emotional, not just logical. Financial success isn't just about budgeting and, doing all this math and stuff. Money is deeply emotional, especially for many first gen Latinas or just Latinas that grew up watching our families struggle. So we carry that financial anxiety with us. And that history shapes how our brains make and react to money decisions. So when it comes time to start thinking about making big financial moves, our nervous systems like shuts down and tells us like, whoa, this is scary. How about let's just not? Because then you start thinking about like, what if I lose everything? What if I make the wrong decision? What if, right? What if something goes wrong? And I hear it all the time when it comes to real estate investing and just with general everyday money decisions. But that fear is understandable. But in order to build wealth, you're going to need to rewire and heal your relationship with money because it's not just about increasing your income. The next thing that Latinos should know is high income does not equal wealth. Yes, you may be making six figures, but you might still feel financially stuck. Why? Because income and wealth are two different things. And let me tell you, when my husband and we started making higher income, we were still just surviving and we couldn't figure it out. And that's because we didn't understand that income is what you earn and wealth is what keeps growing even when you're not working. Income is what pays the bills, but assets changes your life. And that disconnect is what keeps many Latina professionals trapped in this cycle of work, paycheck, bills, and then just repeat. But Latina wealth builders focus on assets that grow over time. Matter of fact, some of the wealthiest people just look boring financially because wealth is boring. Next, financial success requires unlearning. Some of the money advice that we grew up while our parents had well intentions and they could only give us the advice that they figured out on their own. For example, my parents, they came from another country and had to figure out money. And so a lot of the financial advice, for example, debt, doesn't really apply whenever you are trying to build wealth. And even when it comes to like talking about money, we are taught to like, oh, don't talk about your money porque te vas a, sound creída. Like you're going to think that you're being presumida, that you're being arrogant and kind of like displaying your high income, right? I was told that all the time. But when it comes to wealth building, you are going to need to network, which I'll talk about in a minute, and collaboration, mentorship, and that requires talking about money. And so there's a lot of advice around money that we were given when we were younger as growing up that now we have to unlearn because a lot of things are completely different than we were told. Now, this one is one of my favorite ones because I see it all the time, and it is perfectionism delays wealth. Let me tell you how many Latinas fall into this trap when it comes to building wealth of trying to do everything perfect, especially with real estate investing. I'll have Latinas that are interested, but the market's not perfect. It's not the right time. The interest rate is not perfect, and this is not perfect, or I don't have the exact amount of down payment that I need, or X, Y, and Z. And same thing with stock investing, like with their 401k, they're like, well, I can't max out my 401k, so what's the point? And we get stuck in that perfectionism, and that really holds us back. The other side is that a lot of Latinas, they get stuck in this research mode because they want to understand everything so perfectly, so that way they don't make these big money mistakes. Because again, going back to the fear part, so they are just researching, they're reading every Substack or blog or watching every financial video or maybe listening to this podcast, and they're waiting for that perfect moment to actually take action. But let me tell you, wealth builders move from learning to action. The first step is going to be uncomfortable, it's going to be hard, but let me tell you, financial confidence is going to come right after, because perfectionism is really just fear that's wearing this bougie chingona outfit. It's fake. The next thing that a Latina should understand is that time is more powerful than hustle. Our culture tends to glorify, and especially the internet glorifies hustle. The pull yourself up by the bootstrap. Tienes que ser bien trabajadora to get ahead, to make money. And that hustle mentality is really promoted in our culture. But let me tell you, wealth is often built through time and patience, not just the effort that we put. I mean, think about it. Think of your parents. Think about how many people really work hard. I know my parents worked hard throughout these whole years, and they don't have that much to show for it. So that effort does not equal wealth. Once you start understanding about time, you need more than just the hustle. You need to understand how time affects wealth building. For example, investing. Investing compounds. And a lot of times we kind of want things in the now, especially in today's world where everything's so fast, like TikTok and social media. Delayed gratification is a thing. A lot of people just don't have the patience, but time is what's going to help you build wealth. Time gives those investments in your 401k time to compound, time for those assets to grow, and opportunities start to multiply. And of course, the earlier you start, the more time that you give that to grow, the more time that your money has to work for you. Another one of my favorites is that your network shapes your financial future. Again, kind of going back to, not being presumida and talking about money. And so a lot of times we kind of do things on our own. And it also goes back to that hustle culture of trying to be self-made. There's like a lot of pride that is attached to that. Like, oh, I did this by myself. Nadie me tuvo que ayudar. Nobody had to help me to get to where I am. But let me tell you, when you start start networking, when you start meeting other people that talk about investing, that talk about assets, that talk about real estate investing, that is experience. That is different mindsets, different knowledge that is being shared, and your mind is going to start expanding. You're going to start thinking different about money and how to utilize it as a tool to build wealth, versus if you surround yourself with people that are stressed about money and have a lot of fear and anxiety. And I will tell you that I see this again with real estate investing. A lot of the Latinas that maybe reach out to me that are interested in investing, they don't do it because they don't have anybody else. Again, going back to our environment, that we don't have a tia or anybody else, a grandma, uncle, whatever, talking about investing. And then we come across, for example, real estate investing, and we are the only ones, and we look around and there's nobody else. And so we feel alone, and that deters you from taking action because you don't have anybody to go to mentor you or anything like that. And so network is very important when you are trying to accomplish something, whether it's promoting whatever career or anything like that. Look for those networks because that is going to inspire you and motivate you. And just to plug in my school community real quick, one of the reasons that I'm building this community is because I want more Latina investors, whether they're already investing or they are trying to invest, are thinking about it, to create this network, this environment to help motivate other Latinas so that way they actually go out there and take action versus just researching or thinking about it. Because let me tell you, once I started being in these types of networks has motivated me and has changed how I do things. And so community is one of the most underrated strategies that people just don't think about. Another thing that we should understand is that wealth is about freedom, not status. And let me tell you, I was guilty of this for sure at the beginning. Once I started having a higher income and I was out there buying the Gucci shoes, the Louis Vuitton purse, which I ended up selling because I never used it. It just sat in the closet. And matter of fact, those Gucci shoes I still have, but are also just sitting in the closet. So yeah, like I had the wrong mindset of what wealth was. And that's because the internet loves to make wealth look very luxurious. The luxury car, the designer bags. I mean, that's what sells. That's what drives the views on social media. But again, wealth is supposed to be boring. It's supposed to be motivated by something deeper. And that is freedom, the freedom to leave that toxic job, the freedom to leave that toxico that's, dragging you, or, just taking care of family. For example, again, my goal is to provide for my parents during their retirement. So just freedom to take a break without stressing the bills. It really is just about buying back your time and living life on your terms. Another thing is that generational wealth starts with one decision. Sometimes people hear generational wealth and they think, oh, wow, it requires millions, but it really doesn't. Generational change starts with one person choosing to do something differently. And that person can be you. You can decide to learn about money, heal your relationship with money, your financial anxiety, taking care of that, and learning how to invest and how to build assets slowly. That one step can shift not only your life, but the life of maybe your children or just future generations. It doesn't even have to be your children. It could be your nieces and nephews or just the community itself. And lastly, one of the things that I want Latinas to understand is that real estate is one of the most accessible wealth tools. Of course, I am a real estate investor, so I'm very passionate about real estate investing because, yes, there's a lot of ways to build wealth. You could start a business, you can invest in the stock market, 401ks or so on, and there's other investments that you can do. But real estate has historically been one of the most powerful wealth building tools. And that's because there's so many advantages that a lot of people don't understand about real estate. Besides having a home, a property, you have a physical asset, you can then leverage that asset to do other things. For example, I was able to use the equity in one of my houses to be able to fund my fertility treatments with the cash flow, and the equity was allowed to, save up enough and use the equity to fund a surrogacy journey. And now I have my daughter. And so even with just life goals, fulfilling life goals, real estate can help with that. And of course, it's an asset that appreciates, which means, again, your equity grows as you pay down the debt. For example, if you use the mortgage alone, the house appreciates, you pay down the debt. So now you have equity, which again, you can leverage for things like maybe even buying another property. And then you have that cash flow, that monthly cash flow that, that comes from the rental income when you put it out for rent. But the last thing that a lot of people don't understand is the tax benefits that you get from owning real estate, especially if you are managing the rental properties. Like, there's a whole bunch of extra benefits that comes with that, and understanding how debt works. And I know that real estate investing is seen as a negative thing. We hear it all the time about real estate investors contributing to, high house sales prices and high rent. So then the housing affordability issue is made worse through real estate investing. But in reality, when done ethically, you can not only just build financial freedom, but you can also do it in a way where you provide safe and affordable, stable housing for your community. And I am doing it. Other Latinas are doing it. We're out here, for example, me taking over properties that are owned by slumlords, and I take them over at a discount and fixing them up, making them safe, and keeping them affordable for the community. And so we can still make a positive impact while also building wealth. Because real estate investing doesn't have to be just about profit. It could be about responsibility, building stability, and providing for the community. And so if that is something that you want to do, you want to learn how to invest in rental properties and learn how to build wealth with that and gain financial freedom. Again, you don't have to do this alone. I am building a community. You could also take my free 5-day rental property crash course. It is linked down below in the show notes or in the description if you're watching on YouTube. So make sure you check that out. Again, I'm building my school community where we can network. We could talk about real estate investing. We could talk about other investments as well. But the main thing is going to be real estate investing. Other than that, if you found this video helpful or this episode helpful, make sure you share it with another Latina. So it not only helps them out, but also helps this community grow. Other than that, let me know any comments, questions, or concerns that you may have. Hit me up on Instagram. I could answer it in a future episode. Other than that, I'll see you in the next one. Bye. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to like and share this episode so others can also find this podcast. Don't forget to follow me on all my social medias listed in the show notes below, where you can also find resources to help you in your financial journey. If you're interested in becoming a guest on the podcast, you can find that information in the show notes. Other than that, thank you so much for your support, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye.